Well, we've been shitting on Ubisoft for a while. Let's shit on Blizzard for a little bit. You know, Blizzard used to be that brand that if they see the word Blizzard on that game, people would just buy it out of principle, right? And many companies used to be this, like Bethesda. Like, if you seen a Bethesda game come out, you would just buy it. Like, you'd shut your brain off and consume product. Now we're not at that point anymore. And again, I think the downfall of Blizzard was that the announcement of Diablo Immortals, right? Once Diablo Immortals came out, like, the company actually understood that, oh, well, we shouldn't try to market to our consumer. They know, like, because we know the consumer isn't going to like the direction we're going, even if it will make us more profitable. And that's where you got the outdated April Fool's joke meme guy that I guess was made to apologize because he said that. But yeah, I think that was the turning point. And since then, it has been a massive downward trajectory. So, over 2,550 gone, Activision Blizzard, about 3 weeks ago. Let's give this a watch.
When it came to axing a lot of people, Phil Spencer did not lie. He just used specific language. You see, 3% of Microsoft Gaming's global workforce just lost their jobs. And that makes it seem small. Only 3% global workforce. It feels diffuse. It feels more like me cutting 70 calories a day, which I should probably do. But the thing is, the layoffs are not diffuse. They're targeted. And if you work at Blizzard Entertainment, well, your chances are far worse than 3%, because 3% of Xbox Gaming is a lot of people, if it's only happening at ABK. So that's our first big point. The second point then is spin, and that's because emerging staff reports do somewhat clash with the memo that was issued by Microsoft under Spencer's name. And of course,
Yeah, and it's odd because many entertainment companies are going through this. Like, again, during recessions, people invest a lot in entertainment. So, again, then the companies will obviously try to, you know, capitalize on that market. They'll do massive expansion. But these expansions have always come with, like, the proposed ability to massively and infinitely grow over time, right? So, and then it started becoming unsustainable because they had models like live services, at least in video games, like everything turned towards a season pass, live service, daily login system to sort of drive some level of continuity with their player base in the product. And for some it worked, for many it didn't, but I think live services are something that's going to continue to happen. Like, again, every company has that, and I really hate this fucking term, but I know what he meant by this, the quadruple A game. So games that people put in more time and money into it, which makes the company wants to put more money into it. And like, for example, you have, I guess Warframe, but that's a bad example. But games like Warframe, so you have Fortnite, right? You have Rainbow Six for Ubisoft. You have I guess Blizzard still has World of Warcraft and Diablo. But yeah, games like CD Projekt Red has Red Dead, Rocksteady has Rockstar, whichever one of those has Grand Theft Auto 5. You know, games that, again, have just this massive following of people who religiously play the game and put more and more money towards it, right? And again, it works for a very select few games that just have that value, but not everything will have that value. So why shove microtransactions? Why shove the live service model onto everything? because you have to continuously support it. But if no one's playing the game, you can't support. Like we seen this with Concord, right? If no one's playing the game, it's just costs more to support it than what you're getting.
Of course, all beautifully timed ahead of their next reporting period. You see, big picture, Microsoft are saying that all of this stuff, all these layoffs, they were planned before the merger, that the merger had no impact on these layoffs.
Yeah,
Hell,
that's
they
a
argued
lie.
to the Federal Trade Commission that ABK would be a limited integration studio. That means less integration, so less layoffs and that kind of thing. They literally said this sort of thing would not happen. And when we literally see Xbox gut the ABK support network and handle those functions themselves, well, it's rather suspicious. And that means we got stuff to break down. Number 1, layoffs. Number 2, games. Number 3, what staff who have been given the boot have said. And number 4, the thing I'm going to do first, the big bit of news that just dropped. Because, don't we all love big tech? And look, we are here on YouTube, kind of playing into the maze, so I'm building an alternative for the future. It's bellular.games. Over there, right? We've got exclusive content like Loading Screen, which is our daily publication that keeps you in the loop without exposing you to distractions and apps and all of those things that just make life worse. You also get all of our content ad-free. You often get it early, along with the research reports that these videos are built on, as well as, of course, our member community on Discord. Basically, I don't want to be limited by YouTube. I want to make an awesome experience for you, and that's at bellular.games. The buyback. This is what happened just before I went to record this video. They announced a massive stock buyback and a 10% increase to their dividend. Now, I'm not going to get into financial nerd stuff. Point is, the rub here, they're spending money to juice up their stock price and giving a larger dividend to their shareholders. And so it almost feels like a paradox. On the one hand, they're aggressively cost-cutting staff. It almost seems like Xbox are cash-strapped and barely able to compete with Sony. Meanwhile, they're spending loads of money on buybacks and they're doing larger dividends for their shareholders. But the point is, everyone, this is not a paradox. It is the system. The buyback is not because 650 people got deleted. It demonstrates how the entity that they work for operates at the highest level and what its goal is, and that goal is shareholder value. That is the number one objective of the board, and with that in mind...
Yeah, and again, to do this, you just need growth, no matter what you need to cut off or slice off. And if that means cutting off, set people that you have to pay, give insurance to just to meet that quota, absolutely, right? Like if you're trying to just inflate a number and increase a number, have numbers go up for shareholders, right? Like that's what they're trying to do. I mean...
Let's talk about Phil and the layoffs. Off the top of your head, how many layoffs do you think Xbox Gaming has had this year? And is it more or less than the actual number of 2,550? Because that's how many are gone. Phil's memo basically says this is them aligning their post-acquisition team structure. And he says there's no cuts to games, to devices, or experiences, and then game file sources report that none of the business unit leaders at Xbox or its affiliated gaming teams will be hit. Instead, it says that most cuts are at the corporate and support role, but we should actually examine that wording because the sources say none of the business unit leaders are hit and there are no cuts to games. Those are specific words. They say nothing of the staff in those business units, and as you're about to see, yeah, actually, some games are being impacted. 2 games are struggling most, and they're ones you likely won't shed a tear for. They are Warcraft Rumble and Warzone Mobile. Specifically, Stephen Totilo reports that Warcraft Rumble is moving to post-launch live ops and that Warzone was not as big as they hoped. But that's not the only impact in games. So Variety say that Warzone staff will be shuffled around, and Rumble is basically Blizzard's decision. And on this, I'm honestly not that surprised. I mean, the big hits, COD Mobile, and I don't know, maybe in some regions Diablo Immortal, well, those were co-developed by NetEase. NetEase, the people who specifically are experienced in mobile. And yes, it is insane.
Yeah, again, they're moving to the mobile market just so, again, because mobile games are huge. Like, again, with originally Diablo Immortal, like that was their attempt to step into a market that would guarantee them just infinite growth. Because overseas, like in China, like the mobile market is huge. And again, this is yet another attempt to jump into that market with these games.
saying that COD Mobile and Warzone Mobile basically both exist. What's odd though is the lack of Microsoft's plan, because they said they wanted King as a part of their plan to run their own mobile store, which was supposed to launch in July, but so far there is nothing. A quick note on Rumble then, because it is just the perfect example of a absolute, humongous, colossal waste of time for everyone involved, I would say. I played Rumble. My whole plan was to evaluate free-to-play, to find the grind, and then see how they dangle purchases over me, and then to buy some of those. I was going to do a video, but I just couldn't be bothered anymore. Basically, the core game is pretty well designed, it's pretty sticky, but the lack of content and insane levels of grind are absolute deal breakers, and the content that is there is totally generic.
Yeah, they're trying to rake in that, the whales, the people that are just abjectly addicted to games of those type. It's why you have so many, fake game commercials on YouTube, right? And it's not really because that specific game doesn't exist. That game exists within a mini game of a completely different, base building game, right? And they do this to rope in, the people that are just addicted and will just dump large sums of money into those types of games. And even if they rope in 0.5% of the people that are advertised to, they still just make a killing, because obviously the games are made with very little, maybe there's some level of rigging, some level of mechanics, some level of Excel spreadsheets, but it's a game that's probably thrown together by a bunch of college students.
It's just stuff in themed maps around zones that you know. There's no stories, there's no mini campaigns, the content cadence is pretty awful. I then compare that to what my friends who play Eastern gacha games do. And yeah, they definitely are squeezed for money, but my god, do they get a lot of content in return. Very much unlike Rumble, which just makes me think, these people, this team had no business building Rumble. Why was it greenlit in the first place? Were they just chasing for Hearthstone? But guess what? There's a grind that we can sell the solution for even harder. It just says to me that this whole thing was doomed from the start, and they did not have the in-house, chops to make a game like that good. And all that we, the players, got in return from that was staff moving away from games that we actually care about. And so with this cut, we see that internal mobile game stonks are down. It's not just them, and to be honest with you, I think a lot of those internal mobile games were kind of massive wastes of time. It just sucks, and those wastes of time also impact the people. Next.
Well, it's bad for the consumer, because it's clear that the consumer base just does not want this. They want a concise, clear product but again, they want to appeal to a completely different audience than people that play those types of games, right? But for some reason, they don't want to give you that. They just want to give you, maybe they can rope in the original groups of people, but for the most part, they're trying to just rope in individuals that are, addicted to those types of games. The mobile game crowd and the mobile game people that are just going to probably shove out thousands of, actually hundreds, even hundreds of thousands of dollars. And even if it's just someone paying $20, if 10-20% of the player base does that, depending on how many people play it, that could be a lot of money.
Let's talk about staff and the who, because it's not just mobile games. We do not have a lot of public reveals here, but the few we've got are kind of telling. An encounter designer, a 9-year veteran on World of Warcraft, and certainly the new raid is fantastic, but there's a few little instances where I feel like more hands in deck would have been useful, so that's kind of sad to see. There's a senior talent marketer who said that most of her team were impacted, and I believe that was in the capacity of recruitment and that sort of thing. And then the story and franchise development team got hit again. And the wild thing is that department has struggled for ages to the point where it actually impacts Blizzard products. So Warcraft Chronicle Volume 4 was published full of errors and inconsistencies. And the point is, the story and franchise development team are the people who are supposed to fact check that, to keep it right, to help keep the developers on track with story. And we've continually heard from people who used to be on that team that it was understaffed and overtasked. Then we've seen a producer go on Rumble, an IT engineering manager of 17 plus years, along with further reports of engineers and recruiters being hit, but we know that via LinkedIn status is changing. And remember, whenever Phil says the majority are corporate and support roles, that's because they want you to think that they're trimming fat. Yet evidently, there's a veteran World of Warcraft encounter designer gone, and that's the thing.
Yeah, again, this is not surprising. Like, they want to be like, oh, well, we've overexpanded, we're just cutting down. But that's not what's happening, right? What's happening is they're they're kind of axing upper, like people that's been in the company for maybe a couple years, and they're trying to, I guess, maybe hiring someone new. Like, that could be the case. Or, they're trying to hire in, I don't know, you could argue maybe ideological possessed individuals, but we don't know. I mean, Blizzard has been kind of going down that route, but up until now, it's just, again, all primarily speculation. But again, Blizzard has yet to even release a good product. Like, I know they released Diablo 4, the expansion or the DLC, right? But other than that, and I heard that was just sort of mediocre. Like, Diablo 4 is just not really much of a game I care to play anymore. But, you know, if you compare it to Diablo 2, it's just worse. And you have Overwatch 2, which I heard was getting rolled the fuck back to Overwatch 1 because nobody's playing Overwatch 2. And what other games do Blizzard like? Again, they have Hearthstone, mobile card game. They have another like mobile game. But this is Activision Blizzard, so there's always going to be a group of Call of Duty people that just play because it's Call of Duty, or like Warzone, and you play with your friends and it's whatever. But I don't really know what else does Activision release. Outside Call of Duty, I don't know. Warzone or maybe even Black Ops.
650 people are gone. The majority may be corporate and support, but that could be 400, which would leave 250 frontline developers, and their statement would still be true. Now, I don't think that many frontline developers are gone, but I just want to bring up the point that any memo like that has got to be read with the utmost skepticism because it's trying to sell you in their vision. Then there's the problem of definition. How the hell do you define those things? Corporate, marketing, stuff like that? I mean, games need to be marketed well. How often do we see shit marketing that misses the mark for IPs for brands that we care about? I mean, take the team that does Warcraft social media. They would be considered a support team. The insinuation is they're non-essential, and in a way that's technically correct. If the Twitter account dies, WoW will survive. But what that team has done is totally overhaul World of Warcraft's social presence within just a few years, creating a far more, honestly, like authentic feeling link with their community. So if you got rid of all those support people, guess what? You'd actually lose something pretty damn big that's high impact and that supports the game's health. And it's this type of gutting specific support and replacing it with generic support from Xbox Gaming that leads to stupid stuff like the FF14 thing, where basically, right, their system, which was all machine learning based, it was banning people because of free company. Hey, do you want some free company in your area? Well, come down to my housing ward. That's what they thought it was, which in fairness is kind of what happens in that game. But basically, a free company's like a guild. People were getting banned because the bot thought it was solicitation, which is insane. You see, that's the big problem. Centralizing game support functions to Xbox generically means that specific game experience is lost, and that blows especially for the likes of Blizzard, where their customer service used to be renowned and so often were fellow turbo players of the games. But of course now ticket times are far longer and it's generally seen to be way worse, even though some individuals are still there trying. And that's not a surprise. Whole offices of customer service were axed. Take their Austin office that handled IT infrastructure. It's been ravaged multiple times.
So what I'm getting out of this, right, I've been silent because, I mean, I don't really much have an opinion on most of this, but again, what I'm trying to get out of this is I guess they're attempting to downsize so much, and even in like their IT detect like the IT area, the community management area, and because of that, now they're doing automated systems. And I know Activision Blizzard, along with most things under Microsoft, is going through massive levels of restructuring, right? Because, you know, Microsoft is doing the EA thing where they're just buying up companies, buying up IPs, and they're getting stretched relatively thinly, and there's large levels of structuring, and with this game, like they're just gonna release yet another Call of Duty, yet another goofy ass mobile game, maybe an expanse to a game that's been out, but again, for the most part, they're spread relatively thinly. And again, they're trying to have still make number goes up, so they're axing people.
Brutally so. Now, Microsoft are not wrong to see duplication in roles, but the thing is, that's duplication in job title. It's not necessarily duplication in detail, and it's the details that matter because those are the specifics of how you execute your job. But such is the case with mergers. Sometimes part of the value add is just cutting down duplication, and that is why Mr. Spencer says this. With these changes, our corporate and supporting teams and resources are aligned for sustainable future growth and can better support our studio teams and business units with programs and resources that can scale to meet their needs.
And that's from the guy who's just been going on a pity fucking party for Xbox, right? He's ordering the French cries. Like he needs you to call the wambulance, right? Because that nobody cares for Xbox, and nobody's like they want to become the Netflix of gaming. Like I'm pretty sure they want to completely get rid of the physical Xbox, but I mean, people still have the hardware, so at least they have to give something. And this is why PlayStation can get away with releasing a $700 fucking dollar console, and it starts out at $700, right? But then you gotta buy like what, 3 or 4 games. You gotta buy a remote and maybe a backup. You gotta buy batteries. You're paying for the PlayStation Play Store. Like at the end of the day, that might equal out to over $1,000. Like at that point, why not just get a PC? Because you already have access to the biggest game library. Like there's not even really many exclusives, or if they are, they'll eventually release on PC in a year or so, which you can wait. I mean, again, you have so many fucking banger games, right? So, I mean, why even have an Xbox? But why even have a PlayStation? I don't know. The console war is already over, and PlayStation 1, they don't have to compete anymore. They can effectively become the Apple of consoles and of, gaming. So, whatever.
Spoken like a true manager and not one who's dealing with the details. So,
Isn't Phil like the CEO? Yeah, he is the CEO. Yeah, I thought Phil was the CEO of Xbox. Eh.
if you're at Blizzard, I am sure you're thrilled to start using Microsoft Teams and Azure DevOps.
Yep.
And of course, for you and me, it blows. Microsoft have put so much of their customer service over to chatbots. And look, for triage, I'm not against the chat. I mean, a chatbot with good RAG implementation is probably more useful than a standard FAQ to most people. But the thing is, those tools can be leaned on too hard, too early, by people who don't do the details themselves.
Yeah, and to my knowledge, Microsoft is trying to erase most of the things. Like, they're trying to erase, say, the soul of Xbox, the spirit of Xbox, and just have it just to pump out yet another fucking product. And I think they're trying to do the exact same thing for Activision Blizzard. Like they're trying to erase many of the overhead, like the underhead. Well, it's the overhead that Activision had, and just replace it with the Microsoft overhead. Like I think that's what's been happening.
Microsoft's bull case, in a way, is something I'm behind. The idea of automating drudgery. Take the butter-passing robot from Rick and Morty, right? Humans should be working on problems that require human intelligence and creativity. But here's the problem. It's such an easy argument to make at the C-suite level, but it's far harder to implement. And as anybody like me who has had the Dante of chatbots just juggle them for hours, well, not for hours, but you get the point, well, the tech ain't there yet. And here's the problem. These tools can be goddamn amazing. That's outside of games and, say, medical screening. Inside of games, Blizzard uses a machine learning tool to resize helms. That is an artist-led workflow improvement, because nobody enjoys that. I use a AI-augmented thing for spelling, grammar, and custom checks that is leagues beyond Grammarly, to the point where it can spell check Warcraft character names. My email client, Superhuman, it summarizes email chains super well and gives me context. Those things all rock, and they're great.
Yeah, I mean AI is good as a tool, right? Not as a means to replace, right? Because again, there's been this like cultural push against AI, but it's something that's just going to exist. It's going to be implemented into everything. Hell, even fucking the D&D site, D&D Beyond, is using AI. Like it's here to stay, so you might as well just use it as a tool. And it can be useful if it's used with human oversight. But if it's just something to put in place of humans, I think that's kind of the problem.
For the same reason the Blizzard's helm resizing is. It's user driven, because I know my job, I know what good looks like, I know how I work. I am sure that Satya Nadella, CEO of Microsoft, is lovely. Same for Phil, absolutely. But they don't know how I work. They don't know how a frontline person doing CS on World of Warcraft works in specific World of Warcraft ways.
There's CEOs that read from spreadsheets, read from board meetings, read from prompters. They don't actually understand the user experience. I doubt they even play games or have to interact with the things they're imposing on the consumer, right? So that may be the problem, right? Is they just don't really understand. But they're being told, oh yeah, this is groundbreaking. We can increase profit margin, increase, all these, I guess, community driven things with it. But again, they just don't know the consumer interaction with these systems.
By definition, they are not frontline. So when the AI tools get pushed down from the top, especially at a company with tens of thousands of staff, it is not like you or me finding a tool and using it. Does Satya sit down and work customer service once a month so he understands what that team's doing? Does Phil shadow a mid-level producer on Warcraft so he understands what those people are doing? No, they're too large for that as an organization, and that means the leaders can be out of touch. And that means when we think about the layoffs, when we think about the automation, it all just kind of begs a question with these staff. Why did the flurry of unionization at ABK not protect people? Well, the answer is the parent union, Communication Workers of America, can't actually do much about this right now, other than a harsh statement. The reason why, though, is maybe not what you think.
I think the reason why is, again, there's this odd perception with unions that they're made to protect the worker. It's like, no, they're there to protect the company. And if a union manager actually steps out of line and actually wants to protect the worker, like, what's stopping the company from just replacing that guy with yet another yes man, right? And again, if you're told to go on strike, there's nothing you can do about it. Even if you have bills you gotta pay, even if it doesn't really affect you, the situations that are happening, like you're told to go on strike, you're told to go months without pay, right? And when it all comes back, at most you may get a $20 gift card, right? And again, this is pressure. The point is to, effectively to have the company bribe the union meister, right? is effectively money laundering, and the worker rarely sees even a cent of that money. They rarely see any benefit other than, okay, I guess it's a slight annoyance for the company to have to bribe the union manager. And maybe there are some that legitimately care, but again, at the same time, they're still just there to protect the company, not really the worker.
because none of the people who got laid off were under one of their unions, which is exactly what happened during the last far larger round of layoffs
Yeah.
at ABK. Microsoft is a gigacorp that does not care about you. Act accordingly.
Yeah, and again, that was a loophole, right? You'd expect the union to still have their back, but again, if you weren't in the union, they're like, oh, well, tough shit.
And next, Ubisoft are in pretty deep trouble that threatens the founding family's finances directly, and you can check it out next.
Yeah, I mean, most of this I didn't really have an opinion on, but I mean, I understood the whole layoff situation because many companies are going through this, and I understood like the union idea because, I mean, that's why the company I work for we don't have unions because it's like we can treat our employees with respect without having this money laundering level of shillery happening in our company. But I mean, for the rest of this, I mean, Blizzard Activision's obviously going down. Not surprised, going down an interesting rabbit hole. But that's all I really gotta say about this. Peace.